and I just lose it. I mean, I screamed like a maniac. I kicked away from him. Deep within the forests of central Michigan lies an area called the Omer Plains. Lush grass grows there, there's beautiful wildlife, and it's surrounded by tall elms and oaks and maples. But the locals, though they appreciate the natural beauty of the area, they always tend to stay out of that area when night falls. The reason for this is because of the local legend, the legend of the Witchy Wolves. Now, the Witchy Wolves is an old Native American legend. As the legend goes, Native Americans who had settled in that area on the land, once they passed away, they would actually have guard dogs guard their grave sites. And these guard dogs were tall, powerful, ferocious animals. And not only did they not let people near the grave sites of the Native Americans, but they wouldn't let people step on Native American land. Well, eventually, these dogs passed away. But it is said that their spirits are still in the area and still protecting the land of the Native Americans who settled there. Today, I'm going to tell you my own encounter with the Witchy Wolves in a tale I like to call Pale Skin and Red Eyes. So the year's 1999. I'm 10 years old. This story takes place where my parents live. It's still where they're at, mid-Michigan. We live in kind of this weird area. There's this village called Sterling that was west of our place. And then if you go south of our place, there's a little town called Standish. And then if you go east, there's a city called Omer. It's actually the smallest city in the entire state of Michigan. Kind of in the triangle of those three places, that's where we lived. We lived on a dirt road off of a dirt road, and I'm talking miles of forest all around, very few neighbors. Probably on our road there were maybe 5 or 6 people total that lived on the entire stretch of our road that was maybe like 2 or 3 miles long. Like I said, it's 1999. I'm 10 years old. I'm with my brother Josh, and my brother, he is 2 years older than me, so I'm 10, he's 12 at the time. And then we're also with my next door neighbor, whose name was Kenny. Now, Kenny, when I say next door neighbor, I just mean it was the house after our house, next to our house, right? So he lived probably 3/4 of a mile away, something like that. So it's not like we're literally neighbors sitting next to each other, right? So we're actually at Kenny's house, me, my brother, and Kenny, and we're just hanging out, having fun, watching movies. You know, there was always this dynamic where if I was with my brother and it was just the two of us, we would get along great. Everything would be fun. We would be enjoying ourselves. But if we were ever with somebody, he always liked to mess with me. He would play tricks on me, pranks, scare me, and tonight was no different. So we're at Kenny's house, we're hanging out throughout the day, and it's getting pretty late, kind of going into evening. We're talking maybe like 6:30, 7 o'clock, and it is late summer, early fall. So nights are starting to come a little bit earlier. So we decided we're going to go from Kenny's house to our house, and he was going to stay the night with us. And so we make the long trek from his place to our place. So he lives not just off of the same dirt road as us, but this really long driveway that goes way back into the woods. We traverse that long driveway all the way back out to the road, and then we head west from his place to our place. And so we're just sort of talking, hanging out, enjoying one another's company. We get closer to my house. So before we get into what actually happened, it's helpful to understand the layout of the area. So the road we're currently traveling on goes east and west, and we're actually traveling from east to west. And then there are oil well trails that go north and south. And so there's sort of 4 different quadrants. Now the northwestern quadrant, that is where our parents' house is. That's where we're headed. And then all 3 other quadrants, northeast, southeast, and southwest, are all forested areas. And there are these oil well trails that head straight north and straight south. And so we are actually approaching that area where you can see my parents' house. You can see the light on. It's late enough that their porch light is on and we can see that. And we are now at this sort of intersection where if you were to go straight north, you would head on this northern oil well trail that goes into the forest, and the same exact thing if you were to head south. And so we get to this place where, these two trails sort of diverge from the road, and it's close enough to our parents' house that I can see the house. And I remember it was late enough that the porch light was on. And so it's getting pretty dark out. It's definitely evening going into night. And you have to remember, this isn't like a city. There's no street lamps. There's nothing. In fact, it's one of the places in Michigan where you could just go out and see the stars. There's no real light pollution or anything like that. So it's pretty beautiful. And so we get to this area, and all of a sudden, and I'm guessing they had probably planned this beforehand, or maybe were whispering to each other and I didn't notice, but all of a sudden, Josh and Kenny, they grab me and they start pulling me down that southward oil trail. And one of them has kind of like my body, and the other one grabs my feet, and they're sort of hauling me back south on this trail. And this is obviously terrifying. I'm a 10-year-old boy. At this period in my life, and for a long time after this, I was extremely afraid of the dark. Not just your average run-of-the-mill afraid of the dark. I was bordering on nyctophobia, where if I was going to go to sleep at night, I was afraid of the closet opening, and I would have to either keep it closed and locked. I would put a nightlight in my room. I would leave the light on and sleep with the light on in my room at night. I wouldn't take the garbage out. If it was my night to take the trash out, somebody had to come with me, or I just wouldn't do it. And so I am unnaturally afraid of the dark. And so that is sort of the mindset that I'm already in. Here we are. One has my legs, one has, my body, and they're dragging me back on this trail. There's a part of me that knows that they're just messing with me. They're saying things like, "We're going to take you to our leader. Just wait till we get you back there and see what happens to you." And there's a rational part of me that knows these guys always mess with me. This is just another time where this is happening. But there's this other irrational fear part of me that is just screaming, like, even if they're messing with you, you don't want to be left alone out in these woods by yourself. Because that was really, I think, what I was probably scared of, was that they were going to get me far enough back there and then just go to my parents' house, and then I was going to be stuck in the woods and have to navigate home. And the thought of something like that terrified me. And so I am fighting tooth and nail to get free. And, when you're a 10-year-old boy, you're pretty wriggly. And so I'm really fighting, giving it my all. It's not like they're, overpoweringly strong as a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old. And so I do finally break free. And we had not gotten super far back on the trail by this point, right? Because as soon as they started, I knew what was going on and I'm fighting. And so I break free and I fall to the ground. And I remember picking myself back up, and I just start running for my parents' house. I just want to get home. And so I start running down the trail. I turn onto this dirt road, and there's a part of me that's already relieved. Like, there they are. I just have to make it there. But these dirt roads, they're not very well kept. And so there's, giant stones, there's potholes, there's all sorts of problems with these roads. And whether it was something like that or just I was a clumsy 10-year-old boy, either way, I trip and I fall. I remember I'm laying down on the road, and, I wasn't hurt or anything like that. When your adrenaline's pumping, even if you do scrape your knee or something like that, you don't really notice. And so I remember I grabbed the ground, I pushed myself up, and then I sort of turned, and there's this thing standing over top of me, looking down at me. And this thing looks just like my brother. It has the same facial features that he does. I remember so clearly, the same nose, same eyes, same everything. It's the same size. It looks just like him. But there were three things that truly terrified me. The first was, he did not run up on me. Remember, I had broken free. I got away from him and I was running. And I didn't hear him hoofing it behind me or anything like that. And when I fell and got up and turned, I had expected to see them running out of the trail and onto the road. He wasn't doing that. He wasn't running at all. He had already gotten up to me and was standing over, staring down at me. And I remember the look in his eyes was not him. he wasn't trying to be scary or intimidating. It was just a totally straight-faced look that didn't look human. It just looked totally vacant. And he's not moving, just staring down at me. So that was the first thing that I remember, is he was already there on top of me, staring down with this totally vacant expression that was just terrifying. The second thing I remember is that even though at this point it's nearly pitch black and there's no lights anywhere, I can see that his skin is unnaturally white. It is pure pallor. It looks like a dead person's skin. I mean, there's no color in it at all. And the third thing, and more than anything else, this is what sticks with me decades later. I remember that his eyes were blood red. And I'm talking pitch black outside, shouldn't be able to see virtually any features at all. And his eyes, they pierced the dark, blood red, staring at me. And I just lose it. I mean, I screamed like a maniac. I kicked away from him. And then I got up and I literally ran the rest away to my parents' house. And I get inside and I'm crying and I'm covered in dirt and grime. And my parents are like, what happened? What happened? Is everything okay? And I don't even really know how to explain it to them. But I'm like, I don't know. Something was wrong with Josh. And then he comes in. And, my brother, he's used to messing with me. And he knows, that I tend to react a little bit, frightened or whatever, but nothing like this. And so he's very concerned with my reaction. Kenny comes in, same thing. Everybody's kind of freaking out. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm trying to explain it. Josh, he was standing on top of me. He was looking down at me, but it wasn't him. He had just his face was pale. His skin was pale. There was no color in it. I could see his eyes. They were blood red eyes. I could see him even in the dark. And, they're adults and I'm a 10-year-old kid. And so they just think that this is just another time that I'm freaking out. And, at some point, everybody convinces me to calm down. I didn't really see what I saw. And they're trying to have this narrative. And I'm outwardly saying that I accept this, but inward, I'm thinking, I don't care that I'm a 10-year-old boy. I saw what I saw. It was one of those times where it wasn't that I was just afraid, something was wrong. Some time passes, sort of things get forgotten about a little bit. Nobody really talks about it too much anymore. This is, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months later now. And so a couple of months have passed. Everybody has now forgotten about the incident. It is nighttime again. Josh, my brother, is walking from our house back to Kenny's house, but he's not with Kenny. He's actually with Kenny's older brother, Gary. Now, I want to say Gary was probably 5 or 6 years older than Kenny. So if Josh was 12, this probably puts Gary at 15, 16, something like that. He's quite a bit older than our age group. And so they, leave my parents' house for whatever reason. They were hanging out there and they were going from our place to Kenny's place. They leave our house. They walk out onto the road. All of a sudden, Gary looks over and he's sort of startled. And he gets scared and he starts running. And he doesn't turn around and run back to our house. He actually runs all the way to his house, which, like I said, it's like a mile and some change away. It's a pretty long distance. And he just runs all the way back to his place. Josh doesn't know what's going on, but is following him, trying to keep up. Finally, they both make it to Kenny's house. Gary is inside already when Josh arrives. They go inside. Gary, as soon as he ushers Josh inside, locks the door and is just freaking out, hyperventilating, literally tears running down his cheeks, very scared. And Josh is trying to have a conversation. What's going on? What happened? Why are you doing this? Finally, Gary calms down a little bit. And he looks at my brother and he says, I know this is going to sound crazy, but we were walking and on the corner of that oil well trail, just sitting there, there were these two people sitting down. And I kind of looked over at them to see what was going on. Because remember, we're in the middle of nowhere. Nobody lives near us. Certainly nobody's sitting in the grass just on the side of the road. It's, you know what I mean? That just doesn't happen where we grew up. And so naturally, he's very curious about who would be out here at night sitting down by this oil well trail. And so he looks over just out of curiosity, and he said, these two people looked up at me, and he's like, I don't know how else to say it, but they had extremely pale, like white pallor skin, and their eyes, he said, even though we were a distance from them, even though it was dark, he said their eyes were blood red, and I can see them even in the dark. Josh gets chills because Gary and Kenny, they're actually stepbrothers. They don't live together. Kenny had never told Gary this story, so Gary had literally no idea that this had happened. And now all of a sudden it's months later, and he sees basically the exact same thing that I describe in the exact same place. So now Josh is freaked out, but there's not really anything we can do about it. And so another couple weeks goes by, and Josh and Gary are actually at Gary's grandma's house, just watching TV, hanging out, watching movies, stuff like that. Gary happens to mention the incident to his grandma. And his grandma, he explains what happened to me, he explains what happened to him, and his grandma very casually, sort of nonchalant even, just says, oh yeah, those are the Witchy Wolves. And so she goes on to explain, they're these Native Americans who settled in the area. They had these dogs who were guardians, basically. And so when they passed away, these dogs would just sit at their gravesite and protect their gravesite. Not only just their gravesite, but basically anybody who would come into the area on the land, they would chase them off. The legend goes that when the dogs passed away, their spirits still reside there, and basically anybody who comes onto that land during certain times, certainly at night, very strange things happen. There have been people who've reported hearing drums out in the middle of the woods, footsteps, screams, war chants, all sorts of interesting phenomena have happened throughout the years. There are hundreds of accounts of these kinds of things happening. And so now, armed with the knowledge of what we're sort of up against, we decide that we're going to try to get some sort of evidence of this happening. Get a big group of kids together, and some of them were our cousins, some of them were friends of ours, stuff like that, and they all come over to my parents' house. We all convene there. And we want to make sure, of course, it's nighttime because we want the best opportunity to catch this thing happening. And so we get one of these old camcorders that you need one of those big tapes to push in, and you have to actually hold it, these old camcorders. We get that ready. We get all the kids ready, and we leave our parents' house. We go down the driveway. We get out to the road, and then we head over to this corner on the oil well trail. We get close to this area, and all of a sudden, the camcorder stops working. It gets fuzzy, and then all of a sudden completely cuts out. Now, we had charged the battery to 100% before we even went out there. We had been planning this sort of encounter for a while. And so it made no sense whatsoever. The camcorder worked perfectly until we get to this area, and all of a sudden the screen gets fuzzy, and then the whole thing just dies. So we freak out. We run away from the area, and we get back to my parents' driveway, and by the time we had gotten back to the driveway, the camcorder started working again. It turned back on completely by itself. The screen looked fine. It was as if it had worked perfectly the entire time. And so I think that was kind of the point where we just decided we were done dealing with this thing. We were done messing with it. Stay away from that area at night unless you absolutely have to go near there. And that was pretty much how this story ends. I can't explain what happened. I recall the details. Even now, thinking back, I remember exactly what I saw. I don't think it was the imagination of a 10-year-old boy. I genuinely think I had some sort of encounter with something I can't explain. I'm not the only one who encountered it. So thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoy this type of content, first-person narratives of supernatural, unexplained events, then please like this video and subscribe to my channel because that's what I produce. I try to put out a video at least once, if not twice a week, and my aim is to increase that in the future. So please join me next time. Pull up a chair, the fire will be stoked, and I'll have another story for you.